guys, this is our MT-09, or if you're in the States, FZ-09 turbo kit install video. We're going to run through what comes included in the kit, some of the tools that you'll need to install it, and then we're actually going to go through and show you the installation. So we're getting a lot of interest on the net and on Facebook, and hopefully this will answer some of your questions. So let's get into it. Okay, let's start here. This is the Garrett roller bearing turbo unit. It comes pre-assembled, as you see it there. This one's actually got the stealth option. It's got the anodized and powder coated and ceramic coated black finish on it. It's got the stainless steel hanging bracket that bolts into the standard exhaust muffler hanging points on the bike. Has the K&N filter in there, the fabricated charge pipe outlet with the pressure line to the wastegate all pre-assembled. This is the oil feed line. It's a braided line. Once again, it all comes as you see it, pre-assembled. On the bottom side we've got the oil drain ready for the fitting, the oil drain fitting to be screwed straight in there. So we're trying to make it as plug and play as possible. This air filter housing was all designed with the position on the bike in mind. The air intake is as protected as it can be. On the bike, actually the motor sits right in front of the turbo there, so it draws its air in from behind the motor, so that you don't get the splash off the front wheel, putting debris up into the air filter. And the same at the rear. This is all protected from the rear wheel from any splash that you'll get off the back wheel. Then we have our CNC machined two-piece billet plenum with the ECU mount on the top. It is, as you can see, it's all nicely finished. It's got an O-ring seal right around the outside with a dozen bolts holding it together. It's got the blow-off valve, 25mm blow-off valve already mounted on the rear of it there, with the throttle body coupler hoses already hose clamped in position. You've got the signal line that runs to the fuel pressure regulator coming out the back of that there. Rubber clamp that holds the ECU into the top of the bracket there. Okay, so this is the main fuel control unit. It incorporates the Walbro fuel pump in there, billet rebuildable two-piece fuel filter. It accepts the standard electrical connection and the standard fuel hose on the bike. That's where the sensor line comes from the plenum. This sets the base pressure. This is a fuel drain line. If there is any sort of a failure in there, it'll drain out onto the ground and you'll see straight away that there's a problem. It's a plug and play unit, accepts the standard O-ring gasket off the stock pump. Like I say, it's all plug and play. Very nice little unit. Moving on, we've got the stainless steel link pipe. This fits to the factory headers. You've got to cut the muffler off the factory headers. It's the one thing that we couldn't get away from, unfortunately. It comes with a spigot that gets welded onto the factory header in place of the muffler, and then this just slips over that on the factory headers. It's held in place by a stainless clamp. A couple of silicon hoses for the charge pipe. That's a little breather for the cam cover hose that normally goes to the airbox, and a plug for the air injection valve hose, which is no longer used. Some stainless steel hose clamps for all your silicon hoses. This kit's actually using a muffler option, which is why it's got this style of outlet for the turbo rather than the screamer pipe. Some P-clamps. Moving over to the lubrication system for the turbo, we've got the braided oil feed line into the turbo. It has its pickup from the main oil galley. This is a little check valve that we've got in there so that you don't get any siphoning of the oil with the motor turned off. So then the oil comes out of the turbo through this drain, through the VDO oil scavenge pump, and feeds back through this fitting, which replaces the filler cap in the clutch cover. So it's a little billet fitting that we've made. Then we've got some stainless steel multi-layer gaskets, some bolts that hold all the pipework together, some replacement higher powered fuses that are required for the system. This is just a oil pressure line for the blow-off valve. Last but not least, the most important, 10 pages of instructions with lots of photos. Makes it all very straightforward. If you follow those instructions, it's not difficult to make this kit fit. The tools that you'll need to make this kit fit: selection of pliers, long nose, some side cutters. These are a set of pliers that came in a bike toolkit, which I've modified with a grinder. These are used to remove the fuel fitting off the fuel pump, the little clip. A simple little mod like that makes life a lot easier. 8, 10 and 12 mil T-bar, 10 and 12 mil socket. If you don't have T-bars, it's not the end of the world. This is a very handy thing. This is a flexible hose clamp tool. You can get by without one, but I highly recommend it. It makes the installation of the hose clamps on the Plenum very easy compared to trying to do it with just a normal type socket. Some screwdrivers and a 4, 5 and 6 mil hex key. Also included in the kit is either a Power Commander 5 tune, which can be, if you already have a Power Commander 5, you can just upload the map into your Power Commander, or we can reflash the factory ECU. It's probably preferable to do the reflash because we can change a few of the other parameters, get rid of some limiters and change a few other things. Some of the overseas customers might prefer to go the Power Commander way because sending your ECU over to us really isn't that practical, I suppose. So yeah, either way, I mean the kit works just as well either way. But so if we do the reflash of the factory ECU, you don't need the Power Commander. So it's one or the other. These are the factory exhaust hanger bolts which we're going to reuse. A file. This is for a bit of clearancing on the underside of the swing arm. There's a few little areas where the wastegate actuator will rub right next to the inside of the swing arm, so there's a little bit of clearancing required. So that this video isn't too long, we've already removed the fuel tank, the airbox, the plastic side panels and the seat unit, the ECU. We're also going to perform the installation of the kit here on the workshop floor. The bike's sitting up on a race stand, just to show that you don't need a bike lift to install the kit. It can be installed in the garage or shed. The first thing we need to do is to remove the fuel pump. I've already loosened the bolts in this one. You just remove that bracket and then the whole unit slides out. Just be careful of the level sensor there. And the gasket on the underside we'll end up reusing. Then we need to remove the fuel level sender off the existing pump. There's these little clips on the side which you've got to push in, one other side, and that clips straight out. Remove the two wires, and then the whole unit just slides straight out. And then we'll take that over and put that on the new pump assembly. We've got the new fuel pump assembly here, so the fuel level sensor just slides into the same sort of holder that is on the standard setup, and the little clips have to locate under these lugs. Make sure that they're clipped in on both sides. and then the wires just plug onto these connectors that are already there, like so. So that's all now ready to put in. The only other thing to do now is to put the original gasket onto this pump assembly. Just got to work its way down over everything. It's a bit tighter to fit, a bit trickier to fit than the original setup, just because everything's a little bit larger. You've got to make sure that it is sitting the same way as when it came off the original pump assembly, which is the tapered face facing out. And now we can go and put that whole assembly into the tank. Okay, now we can put the new pump into the tank. It can be quite tricky because it's a lot larger than the original assembly, so take your time and you just got to work the sensor arm in and the fuel filter, and then you actually got to move this hose across a bit so that there's enough room for the sensor to fit down into the tank. It will go in, as you can see, although it is quite tight, so you've got to take your time. Just tuck the fuel filter in, rotate it to the correct orientation, and then the whole lot can be bolted down in place. Our 4mm Allen key, and just get all those bolts in, get started. And then just tighten them all up. Then we have to turn our attention to the exhaust. Here's one that we've got removed from a bike, and you can see that it's a one-piece unit. The supplied spigot needs to be welded on here, so the muffler needs to be cut off right on this weld, and then that spigot put in place. You can see that we've already done this one and how it has to look. Just got to take care to make sure that the spigot is welded on nice and straight in line with the exhaust system. A 1mm cut-off wheel on a 4-inch grinder works great, as long as you cut right on that weld line. If you don't have a welder, it can be MIG'd or TIG'd. You can go to any exhaust shop and they'll have no problem in welding that spigot onto the exhaust for you. Underneath the bike there's a couple of areas that need clearancing. The first one is this little lug the return spring mounts to on the brake. It just needs to be flattened off slightly to clear the outlet flange on the turbo. And the other one is just up here on the inside of the swing arm. There's this edge here, and it's got a bit of a curve to it, and it sort of sticks out in the middle here. So that just needs to be straightened up because the wastegate actuator sits up here, and it can just rub in this point here. It doesn't need much, just a millimetre or so, just taken off right there, just so it doesn't rub on the actuator. You can use the file for that. I've got a little sander which I use. It just gets up in there nicely and cleans that off. Okay, so as you can see, we've just flattened off the end of this. It's mainly for clearance, just so it doesn't touch the actual turbo. And the same up in there. Not a lot, but just a bit of clearance. The next thing to do is to fit the link pipe. I've just wiggled that onto the spigot there. I haven't got the clamp done up too tight yet. It's just held in position, and then we'll get the turbo mounted and sitting on there before we go tightening anything up. I went ahead and fitted the turbine outlet. I put the multi-layer gasket in there, and you'll notice that this has got one countersunk head rather than the dome head Allen key bolt holding that in. This is right where that bracket sits that we clearanced the for on the brake lever. It just sits right about here, so it's just there for a bit of clearance. So we've got the turbo sitting up in position here. It's hanging off the original bolts, which I've just used the T-bar there to tighten up. It's just hanging off those two top bolts at the moment, and you know, it can all be moved around to get to line up with the link pipe. Next we're going to slide the multi-layer gasket in there and put all the bolts in to the flange, and then we'll get that all tightened up and give you another look there. So we've got that all tightened up in there. You can see why we did that clearancing in the back of that, on the back of that brake lever. Just it sits quite close to the turbine outlet flange. We've got the oil feed line sitting through there, where it just tucks around and goes straight up onto that main oil galley there, through that fitting. We'll do that in a minute. Another very handy tool to have is some sort of little quarter drive mini ratchet. This one's a king chrome one, but there's a number of different brands available. They're very handy for getting in some of the tight spaces, and I don't know if you can see in there, but the top nut on the inside of that flange is quite tricky to get to, and I found that this little tool with an extension on it actually works really well. So just maybe another tool to add to your collection. These are also very good. These are just a ratchet type ring spanner. Around on the air filter side, up in here is where we did that clearancing on the inside of the swing arm. It's quite a tight fit. As the swing arm moves, it does move up away from here, but just so that it doesn't rub. And you can also see the wastegate actuator hose actually runs up quite nicely, follows the line of the frame. It's tucked in there pretty tight onto the actuator. I've just taken the bike off the race stand for a minute, and we're sitting on the side stand. We're going to fit the oil feed line to the turbo. It just goes on the main oil galley there. So I'm going to take an 8mm hex key and remove the plug and the O-ring, and fit the new adapter with the crush washer. That screws straight in. Tighten that up with a 22mm spanner, and then the check valve and the two crush washers just fit through the banjo fitting and screw straight in to the adapter, and then a 14mm spanner. Just hold that hose down and tighten that till it's fairly firm. Don't tighten from the hex key end, that's just a cap that holds the assembly together. Tighten from the 14mm. While we're down on this side of the bike, we might as well fit the oil scavenge pump. Filler cap on the clutch cover can be removed and replaced with the fitting that screws straight in there, and that's a 24mm socket. And just doesn't need to be tight, just so that it's sealed on the O-ring. Then you need a 5mm hex key, and remove those two cover bolts, and then the oil pump assembly with the P-clamp can be mounted up there on the bottom one. Just temporarily hold it all in position. And the small P-clamp up the top here, you can screw that fitting on. And just tighten them up so that it's all held in position. the pump can just be rotated so that the electrical plug is on the inside. The oil drain can be fitted to the underside of the turbo. That just screws straight in. You can use a shifter, but I've got an aluminium spanner there that's designed for this purpose. And just tighten that till it's firm. The wiring for the oil pump, the ground wire just mounts onto that sump bolt, oil pan bolt if you like, just there, and then the wiring routes up with the existing wiring all the way up to the subframe. It then follows the line of the existing wiring up through here, and it plugs into the license plate light wire, just the blue and the red, the blue, red and the brown there, and then it has the fitting, the same connector so that you can plug your license plate light back in there. The fuses need to be replaced in the start solenoid here. The two 10 amp, well, one, there's only one that is actually used, the other one's a spare, but we supply you with two replacement 20 amp fuses. The other fuse that needs replacing is this 7.5 amp signal fuse. We've supplied a 10 amp that you put in its place, like so. Now we've fitted the bottom 90-degree charge pipe silicone hose. Get our trusty hose clamp tool and just tighten those up till they're firm. We've just got the charge pipe in position and then fitted the upper P-clamp. Once we're all happy with where it was sitting, you can just go and tighten these clamps just so they're firm. And now we can move on to the plenum. We've got to fit the upper silicone hose. The easiest way to do this is just to slide the hose clamp down over the charge pipe, and then working from the inside, squeeze the silicone hose down between the cam cover and the frame and work it down over the actual charge pipe until you get to a position where the cam cover sits right in the middle of the 45-degree bend, and then you can bring the hose clamp up and tighten that up using the hose clamp tool again, or your socket, just so it's firm. And now we'll go up and have a look in the top. Looking from the top side, you can see the silicone charge pipe come up through here. This is the air injection valve hose, which we're not using anymore, so we just put the supplied cap in that and tuck it up out of the way. The cam cover breather also gets the breather hose also gets the little breather supplied. Let's fit that clamp back on there, and that can just be tucked up out of the way like that. And now we'll move on to the plenum. The other thing we need to do up here is, on the throttle bodies here, is this little rubber plug. We need to remove that, and this is where the blow-off valve hose, signal hose, is going to fit on. We're going to reuse the little clamp off the rubber cap and just fit the silicone hose onto that fitting, and then it'll run up and the blow-off valve will sit there, and that's the signal hose. Now, to fit the plenum, we're going to put the hose clamp for the charge pipe just over the silicone hose there and sit it with the screw fitting at the top, we're going to remove the TPS because it just makes it easier to get into the clamps, and we are going to lay the hose clamps down like this over the throttle body. Because the silicone hoses tend to be a bit slippery and there's not a lot of grip area at the top of the throttle body, I recommend a bit of brake cleaner on a rag and just wipe it on the silicone hose, and it tends to take that slipperiness out of the silicone, and also give this a bit of a wipe around here so there's no oil or anything around the top of the throttle body. Then we're going to get the hose for the blow-off valve, the signal hose, and just push it onto the blow-off valve there, and then the charge pipe is just going to get pushed onto the inlet of the plenum like that. Now we can start to line up the throttle bodies with the silicone hoses. Now this is quite a tricky thing to do, which is why we're just working with the bottom half of the plenum, so you can get your fingers inside there and help direct the hoses over the mouths of the throttle bodies, and then push it down like that so that they're all bottomed hard against the throttle body. Now this is where our little flexible hose clamp tool comes in very handy. Getting into these, tighten these hose clamps up. Like I said, it can be done with a socket, but this just makes life a lot easier and the whole job a lot quicker. Like that. And then to get to this front clamp, you go underneath, between the frame and the plenum, and just position the clamp where you need to, and just make sure it's in the right spot. And now we can go ahead and put the top on the plenum. Just check that the O-ring groove, the O-ring is actually in the groove properly all the way around. And now we can go around and tighten all those bolts down. Now they're all tightened, we can put our ECU on the top. This ECU I've already flashed with the tune, so we don't need a power commander on this bike. And plug the loom back in there, like that. Now we can go and get our fuel tank. We're just going to plug our TPS sensor back on. Now we can go and get our fuel tank, fit it back in position. So now we can fit our fuel tank. This is that drain hose off the regulator. That just runs down next to the other drain hoses on the bike. Now, you might notice that we've got this hinge style mount. It's another product that we make, which is very handy for exactly this kind of bike, where you want to be able to access under the tank. Because it's got a hinge, we can raise and lower our tank, and we're going to support the tank with a block of wood in this case. Now we can refit our factory drain hoses on the tank. We can also fit the fuel feed hose onto the new connector, just like that. And we can plug in our factory electrical connector to our new wiring on the tank, and that'll just sit they're out of the way. We also need to connect our signal line from the plenum. This is a very important line. It tells the regulator what pressure the motor's running at, and it adjusts the fuel pressure to suit. So we're going to run a little clamp on there just to make sure that it's nice and secure. And now we can go and set our fuel pressure. So I've reconnected the battery. We can now turn the power on. You'll hear the oil pump running, and we are going to set our base fuel pressure. We're looking for 43 psi. That's the oil pump because it's got no oil in it yet. And we're actually right on 43 psi. I've already adjusted this to suit. So let's give it a little test fire. Okay, I've run it for a couple of minutes. You can hear that the oil pump has quietened down because it's actually got some oil circulating through it. That's the sound we want to hear. We can drop the tank down now, and I'm going to go around the other side and fit the muffler, and then it's just a matter of putting all the bodywork back on and we're right to go for a test ride. So the muffler's on. Let's hear how it sounds. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a test ride.